And welcome back to Transforming the Mind, Part 2, still. The 2 altruistic aspirations. The aspiration to attain enlightenment. As we have seen, the highest form of spiritual practice is the cultivation of the altruistic intention to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, known as bodhicitta. This is the most precious state of mind, the supreme source of benefit and goodness, that which fulfills both our immediate and ultimate aspirations, and the basis of altruistic activity. However, bodhicitta can only be realized through regular, concerted effort. So in order to attain it, we need to cultivate the discipline necessary for training and transforming our mind. As we discussed earlier, the transformation of mind and heart does not happen overnight, but through a gradual process. Although it is true that in some cases, instantaneous spiritual experiences may be possible, they are rather unreliable and somewhat short-lived. The problem is that when sudden experiences occur, the bolts of lightning, the individual may feel profoundly moved and inspired. But if the experiences are not grounded in discipline and sustained effort, they are not unpredictable, and their transformative impact will be rather limited. By contrast, a genuine transformation that results from sustained concerted effort is long-lasting because it has a firm foundation. This is why long-term spiritual transformation can really only come about through a gradual process of training and discipline. We have seen that the altruistic intention is endowed with the dual aspiration to help other sentient beings and to attain enlightenment for their sake. First, we discuss the need to have a basic understanding of what is meant by enlightenment. I explained how the Tibetan word for enlightenment, Cheng-chub, is composed of 2 syllables, one relating to the abandon of negativities, and the other to the perfection or positive qualities. We can now further our understanding of enlightenment by considering the presentation made by Maitreya in his Sublime Continuum. He states that all the pollutants of our mind are adventitious, meaning that they can be separated from the essential nature of mind. This indicates the possibility of being able to eliminate the afflictions of mind and heart, that is, afflictive emotions and thoughts. Maitreya then makes the point that as far as the enlightened qualities of the Buddha are concerned, we all possess within us the potential or seed for their perfection. This means that the potential for perfection, the potential for full enlightenment, actually lies within each one of us. In fact, this potential is nothing other than the essential nature of the mind itself, which is said to be the mere nature of luminosity and knowing. Through the gradual process of spiritual practice, we can eliminate the obstructions that hinder us from perfecting this seed of enlightenment. As we overcome them step by step, so the inherent quality of our consciousness begins to become more and more manifest until it reaches the highest stage of perfection, which is none other than the enlightened mind of the Buddha. According to Buddhism, there are 2 types of adventitious pollutants. First are the manifest afflictions of the mind, which take the form of our negative thoughts and emotions, while the second type is known as the subtle obstructions to knowledge. These are the imprints and propensities produced by the repeated occurrence of negative thoughts and emotions in us. Since we have already seen that it is possible to eradicate negative thoughts and emotions, This implies, by extension, that we will also be able to overcome the propensities created by their repeated occurrence. Hang on, please.
My Play-Doh turned into flying.
Oh, wow. Throw it away, okay? Tell Emma to throw it away. Alright, sorry guys. Once we appreciate this point, we will have a sense of what is meant by enlightenment in the Buddhist sense. I pointed out in Chapter 1 that a proper understanding of the nature of complete enlightenment depends on a good understanding of emptiness. The teachings of many of the other ancient spiritual traditions of India also contain a notion of nirvana, moksha, or spiritual freedom. It also seems that some traditions identify these states with a physical realm of existence. However, as far as the Buddhist understanding of nirvana is concerned, it is a state of mind and not an external reality. This is not to say that there is no divergence of opinion amongst the various Buddha schools on the precise meaning of liberation. For example, the Vyabhashika school maintains that the historical Buddha Shakyamuni was fully enlightened and had overcome 2 of the 4 negative forces, namely affective emotions and thoughts. In the powerful forces of desire and attachment, however, it considers that Buddha had not overcome the other 2 negative forces, the force of death and the force of the aggregates of existence. The Vaibhashikas therefore understood final nirvana in terms of the total cessation of the individual. The implication is that when final nirvana is attained, the individual being ceases to exist. This view is not accepted by many other Buddhist schools. There is a very well-known objection by Nagarjuna, for example, who asserts that the logical consequence of the Vaibhashika view is that no one ever attains nirvana, because when nirvana is attained, the individual ceases to exist. So this position is absurd. As we saw earlier, the person is simply a name given to the continuum of psychophysical aggregates, the mind-body complex. And if this complex ceases to exist completely, then the person will cease to exist too. However, this view is not accepted by other Buddhist schools. Similarly, there are many other aspects of the Vaibhashika doctrine that are rejected by other Buddhist schools. In their theory of knowledge, for instance, they reject the notion of sense data. They believe that sensory perceptions occur as a result of the mere interaction between the sense organs and the physical object, and that there are no sense data which act as a medium between the two. One of the objections raised against this theory is that it implies that for any vivid perception of an object to occur, the object in question must be physically present, and yet this is not always the case. From personal experience, we know that sometimes we can have a very vivid recollection of an object as if it were really there in front of us, and yet such a perception is due to the power of memory. Again, the Vaibhashika understanding of the nature of consciousness at the point of death is a much coarser view than that of other schools. Adherents of this school believe that the state of mind at death can be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. But other Buddhist schools have argued that the state of mind at the actual precise moment of death is always neutral, because it is a very subtle state. There are just a few examples of how uncrucial the idea of the Vaibhashika school can be compared to the much more refined understanding of other Buddhist schools. Other schools argue that when one begins to purify the negative aspects of mind and body through the spiritual practice, and as one overcomes negative thoughts and emotions with their resulting propensities and finally eliminates them altogether, one will also be perfecting one's psychophysical aggregates. They therefore accept that all the pollutants of the mind cease to exist. Their manifestations and imprints, the impure body and mind, may cease to exist too. But this does not mean that the very continuum of the individual comes to an end. There is a subtle level of existence which is free of many of these manifest pollutants. My point here is that there is a lot of debate on the exact nature of enlightenment. Basically, from the Buddhist point of view, the nature of true liberation and spiritual freedom has to be understood as a quality of mind, a freedom from the negative aspects and pollutants of mind. According to Chandrakirti, a famous Indian teacher of the Middle Way school, liberation or true cessation is the ultimate truth. His point is that true cessation can only come about on the basis of understanding the ultimate nature of reality, that is emptiness. So here we have a more refined understanding of nirvana as arising from a sound understanding of emptiness. In this view, it is insight into the ultimate nature of reality that enables us to eliminate the pollutant of the mind. Furthermore, it is our ignorance of this ultimate nature of reality that lies at the root of all our obscurations, confusions, and delusions. Finally, it is the emptiness of the mind in its perfected state that is true liberation. So the basis of true liberation is emptiness, the knowledge by which we eliminate our obscurations is that of emptiness, and the final perfected stage in which we attain liberation is the emptiness of mind. When we say that it is the ultimate nature of mind that is liberation, we are not talking about the ultimate nature of mind generally, but specifically about the stage when the individual has overcome all the pollutants and the negative aspects of the mind. So true cessation has two dimensions. One is total freedom from mental pollutants, and the other is the total negation of inherent existence. We can illustrate this with the first verse of Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom of the middle way. I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of teachers, who taught that whatever is dependently arisen is unceasing, unborn, unannihilated, not permanent, not coming, not going, without distinction, without identity, and free from conceptual construction. Nagarjuna pays homage to the Buddha by saying that Buddha taught the principle of dependent organization and emptiness. He describes cessation in terms of the total pacification of all conceptual elaborations. It is when all conceptual constructions have been pacified that there is true cessation. Working for the welfare of others. The other aspiration of the altruistic intention is the wish to bring about the welfare of others sentient beings. Welfare is the Buddhist sense means helping others to attain total freedom from suffering. And the term other sentient beings refers to the infinite number of beings in the universe. This aspiration is really the key to the first, namely the intention to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. It is founded on genuine compassion towards all sentient beings equally. Compassion here means the wish that all other beings should be free of suffering. So it is said to be at the root of all altruistic activity and of the altruistic intention as a whole. We need to cultivate a compassion that is powerful enough to make us feel committed to bringing about the well-being of others, so that we are actually willing to shoulder the responsibility for making this happen. In Buddhism, such compassion is called great compassion. This point is emphasized again and again in the Mahayana literature. The fact that great compassion is the foundation of all positive qualities, the root of the entire Mahayana path, and the heart of the Bodhicitta. For example, Maitreya declares in his Ornament of Sutras that compassion is the root of Bodhicitta. Likewise, Chandrakirti says in his entry to the Middle Way that compassion is such a supreme spiritual quality that it maintains its relevance at all times. It is vital at the initial stage of the spiritual path. It is just as important while we are on the path, and it is equally relevant when an individual has become fully enlightened. The point I am trying to make is that if we look at any Mahayana texts, we will find that compassion is not only highly praised, but the authors are also repeatedly emphasize its importance in the sense that it really lies at the root of all spiritual endeavor. To cite a further example, in the opening verse of solution to his Compendium of Valid Cognition, Dignaga argues that the Buddha can be considered a valid spiritual teacher because he is the embodiment of compassion, and because he has perfected its development. So in fact, Dignaga uses the perfection of compassion as the basis for arguing that the Buddha is a valid spiritual teacher. Of course, having great compassion alone is not enough to be a true and authentic teacher. So Dignaga goes on to say that the Buddha also has direct realization of emptiness and has completely overcome all obstructions. Generally speaking, as I said, compassion is the wish that others should be free of suffering. But if we look into it more deeply, compassion has two levels. In one case, it may exist simply at the level of a wish, just wishing that other to be free of suffering. But it can also exist on a higher level, where the emotion goes beyond a mere wish to include the added dimension of actually wanting to do something about the suffering of others. In this case, a sense of responsibility and personal commitment enters into the thought and emotion of altruism. Whichever level of compassion we may have, for the development of bodhicitta to be successful, it must be combined with the complementary factor of wisdom and insight. If you lack wisdom and insight, when you are confronted with another's suffering, genuine compassion may arise in you spontaneously. But given that your resources are limited, you may only be able to make a wish. May he or she be free of that pain or suffering. However, over time, that kind of feeling may lead to a feeling of helplessness, because you realize you cannot really do anything to change the situation. On the other hand, if you are equipped with wisdom and insight when you have a much greater resource to draw on, and the more you focus on the object of compassion, the greater the intensity of your compassion will be, and the more it will increase. Because of the way insight and wisdom affect the development of compassion, the Buddhist literature identifies 3 different types of compassion. First, at the initial stage, compassion is simply the wish to see other sentient beings freed from suffering. It is not reinforced by any particular insight into the nature of suffering or the nature of a sentient being. Then, at the second stage, compassion is not simply the wish to see another being free from suffering. It is strengthened by insight into the transient nature of existence. Such is the realization that the being who is the object of our compassion does not exist permanently. When insight complements your compassion, it gives it greater power. Finally, at the third stage, compassion is described as non-objectifying compassion. It can be directed towards that same suffering being, but now it is reinforced by a full awareness of the ultimate nature of that being. This is a very powerful type of compassion, because it enables you to engage with the other person without objectifying him or her, and without clinging onto the idea that he or she has any absolute reality. Since compassion is the wish that others should be free of suffering, it requires above all the ability to feel connected to other beings. We know from experience that the closer we feel towards a particular person or animal, the greater our capacity to empathize with that being. It follows, then, that an important element in the spiritual practice of developing compassion is the ability to feel empathetic and connected, and to have a sense of closeness with others. Buddhism describes this as a sense of an intimacy with the object of compassion. It is also called loving kindness. The closer you feel towards another being, the more powerful you feel that the sight of his or her suffering is unbearable. There are two main methods in Buddhism for cultivating this sense of closeness or intimacy. One is the method known as exchanging and equalizing oneself with others. Although it stems from Nagarjuna, it was more fully developed by Shantideva. In the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the other technique is known as the 7-point cause and effect method. This emphasizes the cultivation of an attitude that enables us to realize to all other beings as we would to someone very dear. The traditional example given is that we should consider all sentient beings as our mother, but some scriptures also include considering beings as our father, or as dear friends, or as close relatives, and so on. Our mother is simply taken as an example, but the point is that we should learn to view all other sentient beings as very dear and close to our hearts. It seems that for some, the 7-point cause and effect method is more effective, while for others, the technique of exchanging and equalizing self with others appears to be more effective, depending upon the individual's inclinations and mentality. However, within the Tibetan tradition, the custom really has been to combine both these methods so that one can enjoy the benefits of practicing both approaches. For example, although the principal approach in 8 verses on transforming the mind is that of exchanging and equalizing self with others, the text refers to all sentient beings as our mothers, suggesting that it also incorporates the 7-point cause and effect method. Thank you for listening.